So last time we were talking about iterators, actually yesterday. So if you remember, we use iterators to allow to process a collection of items one at a time. So if you have a collection of items such as an array, any collection of items that you can call, you can access all of these collections one by one using an iterator, so that it lets you to step through each of these items. You have a hasNext method, which indicates if there's any more instance or object available in your collection. So hasNext will be able to use for that, and the next method will return the next item that you have in the collection. So if you recall, you have an iterator class which you have been using so far. Can you remember what it was? Do you remember a next method that you have been using? Scanner, right? In scanner you have been using next line and different methods. However, you had the next, which shows that it's an iterator as well. So you can iterate over set of objects in your collection. So the scanner class is an iterator, as I said earlier. It has a next method which returns true if there's more data to process that is entered by the user, and the next method will return you the next scan token as a string. So we have been using this already, and they're part of iterators. So if you look into the use of iterators, we can use this, for reading information from a file, from user input or any kind of input that you have. In the example URL this sector, we will be using to analyze a given file and access the different URLs you have in the file. So let's go and see that file. So this is the class, and then you have the main method. Basically you have the URL string and then two scanners. One is file scan and then the other one is URL scan. So you have two scanners that you're going to iterate on. And file scan is new scanner, new file, URLs, input. So what basically happens is that normally, if you remember what we have been using in our scanners so far, we've been using the system.in, which indicates the keyboard input from the user. So now we are actually taking the input not from the keyboard but from a file, which we create by new file, and then we give the name of the file urls.inp. So this is the file that we are going to read from, and you can use any file you have in the system. Obviously this indicates where it is located. This must be, in this case, located within your class file in order to access it. So if you look into our folder, you can see that we have urls.inp that is in the same folder with our class file, so that we can access it. Okay? So what we are going to do is basically we will scan the input that is coming from this file instead of the keyboard. So basically it's exactly the same thing, except the keyboard you use a file, which is really helpful. For example, in your projects you may need to read files or write into files and things like those. So it might be really useful for you to to read from a file by using such a scanner. So when you look into the while, if you remember, we have the loop, and then the condition checks file scan, which is our scanner, and then hasNext. We will process until we have an object that we can scan from our scanner, and then until that time we will continue processing. So this is the loop that we are going to iterate in the file, and then we get URL file scan next line. So from our scanner, it is going to extract one of the lines, and then it will copy it to the string URL, right? So we print this system out print line URL, and then whatever that URL is going to be printed on the screen. And URL scan, we create a new scanner. Remember, this was the file scan, initial scanner, which scans the file itself and then extracts one line at a time. And then we have the URL scan, which is going to which is going to be a scanner on the URL. What was URL? If you recall, it is a string, right? So it's a string. It is going to scan from this string now. How are we going to scan it? We will be scanning it by using a delimiter, a slash. So it is going to parse the string into tokens based on the delimiter we have, which is the slash, right? So we will be using, we will be parting it into smaller pieces based on the delimiter we have. And we have another loop, inner loop, which is going to iterate on the line itself, whatever that line is. It is going to check whether if there's any more tokens in the scanner. It is going to new, and then it will print them system out print line. With the space, it will print the next element in the scanner. So basically what it does is that if you have multiple lines, let me open the file here. So if you look into this file, as you can see, this is the file. So what it is going to do is that the outermost loop, the file scanner, will scan this file and then will take one line at a time. So it will take the first line, and then within that line it is going to try to participate into smaller tokens or pieces based on the delimiter, which is the slash. So in this first example, first line, you don't have any slash, so it is going to be only one token. The whole thing will be printed on the screen, and then this will be finished. And when you come to the next one, which is the next line, the innermost loop will try to divide this into smaller pieces, and then you will have the first token as this one. Since you have the delimiter here, it will print this, and then this one and this one. So it will print them with spaces as it is shown here. Right? This is the outermost loop, which is going to iterate on the lines, and then within each line we will be operating in this loop and parting them into smaller pieces. Again, this is the URL scanner, which is going to just use the delimiter slash and find out the smaller pieces. So, and then after each line is printed, you will have a system out print line to go into the next line so that you can print this new URL on the screen again. So let's see how this is going to work out. So as you can see, it takes the first URL, google.com, and then it prints the first token of that first line. And then you have the second line, which is again in the outermost loop, and within the innermost loop you execute these. So it divides them into smaller tokens, java.sun.com, and then you have the slash, so it takes the second line and then the third one here. And again, you are in the outermost loop, you print the third line. Within third line you have 3 tokens, each one printed on a separate line. So this is the inner loop, this is the outer loop. Okay? And you have Duke, CS, Villanova, Edu, Lewis. You divide this into 2 pieces, 2 tokens, and then you have printed them one after the other one. Okay? Any question? So you can, come up with your own scanner and then scan a file or a keyboard input or anything. You can iterate on all of these lines and execute this based on your constraints. Again, hasNext is going to check whether there's any more tokens, and then next line will return a new line, and next will return, as it is shown below, next will return the next token you have in the scanner. Any question? So when we go into the other loops, as we said earlier, we have seen while so far, and then if you recall, we have do while statement, which basically we have already said that it will be executed at least once. So you will execute this statement at least once, and then continue if this condition is satisfied. Continue on with the next iterations. So this was the do while statement. So when we look into the logic of a do loop, so what do we see? We first execute the statement, then go and check the condition. If the condition is true, we continue executing the statement in a loop in this fashion. However, if the condition is false, we just fall below and then continue with the next statement in the sequence. So an example of a do loop, so you have int count equals 0, we start and then we increment our count by 1, print it and then see whether it is less than 5. If it is so, we will go back to top of the loop and then continue to do the same thing over and over until this condition is not satisfied. So again, it is the difference is while loop may never execute. However, do while loop at least must execute once, since you're checking the condition at the end of the loop. Reverse number.java. Let's see this example. So what this does is basically, as it is explained here, reverses the digits of an integer mathematically. So you're reversing the digits of a number mathematically, such as, for example, if I give you 123, it generates you the 321 as a result of this, conversion. So how can you do this? No string operation, but purely mathematically. I remember asking this in CS 101 exams, one of those, how to reverse it using a string, but not this. Don't do it with a string, but do everything in mathematical operations.
Divide by 10 and edit first.
Exactly. So what we could do is, if I have 123, what I could do is I can divide this number by 10 every time and then get the remainder. So I will get, as a result of this, first 3, and then the original number will become 12. And then the next time I divide this by 10, however, I multiply this by 10 as well. So the new number for this one will be 30. However, this will be 1, and then you have a 2 remainder. And then next time what you do, you multiply this by 10 again, so it becomes 300, and then you multiply this by 20, so you add those up, so it makes 320, and then you add the last remainder to it, so it's 321. So this is the logic behind it. Every time you get the remainder, you also multiply it by 10 to get the new number as a result of that. So it's reversing the digits of integer in a mathematical way. So when you look into the scanner here, we have the system input, which is going to take the input from the user, system.in, and then we're going to say enter a positive integer, number scan next int. So we will be reading the next integer from the user, and then we have a do while loop where we set last digit is equal to, what was this operator doing? It's the modulus, which gets you the remainder from the number, and you get the last digit, and you get the reverse by using this last digit. So you use the original number, reverse, multiply it by 10, and add this last digit to this one. In this example, 3 will be added to 0, since original reverse number is 0. And then you have the number set to be divided by 10, so that you get the new number, and continue in that fashion. And at the end, you add and reverse the number into what it was before. So you will continue until you have a number to divide by 10. If it is obviously not greater than 0, you will not be continuing. You're done and finished. Okay? So this do while loop basically reverses the number in a mathematical fashion. Any question? You could do this in a while loop as well, but you have to, change the logic of the number greater than 0, and you have to play around a little bit to get it with a while loop as well. So when we compare while and do loops, as you can see, in the while we evaluate the condition first and then continue with the statement if it is true and have a loop. However, with do loop, we have the statement first followed by the condition. If the condition is true, we continue executing within the loop. And that's basically the difference between while and do loop, as we have been repeating many times. The for statement or the for loop. So you have a syntax like this, as you all know. So you have the 3 parameters in the for. First one is initialization, and then you have a condition to check, and you have an increment, which is basically any kind of operation that you would like. You can put it here in the increment portion. So you have, within the for loop, you have a statement. This could be a compound statement or a basic single statement as well. So we before we start the loop, we initialize and then we check the condition, and every time we finish, we perform this increment operation at the end of all the statements execution. So this is the initialization. So you initialize first and then condition evaluated. Please pay attention to this part, because some of you still don't understand the logic of the for loop. Sometimes you think that condition is evaluated after the statement, or initialization performed after the condition, and things like those. So you have to understand the logic. So you first initialize, then check the condition for every time. So even during the first iteration, you need to check the condition first. If the condition is satisfied, you execute the statement, and then after the statement, you perform the increment. Okay? And then the loop continues in this fashion. Before every iteration, you check the condition. If the condition is true, you go execute statement, and then increment, and go back to the condition check again. So a for loop may execute 0 times as well. So you may never execute a for loop. It's possible based on the condition you have, right? So some of you, I remember, asking things like those. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you understand this. However, even if the first iteration, if you don't have a condition set as true, you will fall behind, and you will go to the false part of the loop. So you can convert a for loop into a while loop, basically. If you look into the conversion, you can see that you have the initialization first, right, before the loop actually executes, and then you have the while. So this is the condition for our for loop. We're going to execute based on this condition. If this is true, we will execute the statement, and then we will increment after every iteration. So basically, this is one-to-one to what you have seen with the for loop, right? So if somebody asks you to convert a for loop to a while loop, you should be able to do that. Can you convert a while loop to a for loop as well? You can do that, right? Because you again have the condition as you had with the while loop, and then you also have the statement part, which is also present in the for loop. So you can do one-to-one, conversion between for and while loops. However, the general uses of those two loop structures is different. If you have a number of things that you need to perform, you usually go with a for loop. However, if you have a certain condition that you are looking forward to see, then you would go with a while loop instead, right? So if you have an array that you're accessing 100 elements, you probably want to go with a for loop. However, with while, let's say, if there's a certain Boolean condition that you're looking for, then that's where you would probably go with a while loop instead. So when you look into the for loop, we had the initialization, int count equals 1. This is the initialization. And then you check for the condition, even with the first iteration. You check it. If it is true, you execute this, and then increment afterwards. So one thing to note is that what kind of a variable is this count? It's a local variable, but local where? It's a local variable that is only available within the for loop. So you define it to be you define it to have a data scope that is only available within your for loop. So you will have count only be used within this loop. If you try to use outward, then outside of this loop, you will have either an error, or you have to declare it again as well. So if you have, again, multiples of things that you would like to perform, for loop will be well suited for such kind of operation. As in this case, you have numbers starting from 100, and then until, it is when it's greater than 0, you continue, and every time you decrement by 5, and print that number on the screen, which is going to basically print the multiples of 5 starting from 100 all the way to 5, right? So let's see multiples.java example here. So you have a constant final int per line. So every line you would like to have 5 numbers printed, right? And then you have a value limit mult count, which is equal to 0. So these are integer variables defined. We have the scanner for our keyboard input, and we have enter a positive value, scan this integer, scan next int. So I got the value that is entered by the user. Now I enter an upper limit. The limit is set by the user also, and I start with printing the multiples of the number. So the multiples of value which is entered by the user between value and the limit is printed on the screen. So let's execute this to show you what it actually does. So enter a positive value, let's enter 4, and then enter an upper limit. Let's say I enter 1000. So it's going to print me the multiples of 4, 5 numbers per line, and it's going to continue all the way up to 1000 starting from 4. Right, so this is what it is doing. When you look into here, it starts with 4 and prints all the numbers aligned on each line. So when you look into code again, so you take the first value and then the limit, which is the maximum value. Then you have a for loop, which is going to basically print these numbers one after the other one. So as you can see, for mult equals value, which is going to be 4, and then until 1000, you will every time increment by 4, which was the initial number I entered, 4 plus 4 plus, and so on. So every time it will print, multiply the multiple of the number, plus a tab, right, to align them correctly. That's going to write one number next to the other one. How do we achieve the next line statement? When you look into here, you can see that how it is achieved. We increment count by 1 for each iteration, and then I check if the modulus of count is with 5 is equal to 0. That means I'm done. I have done enough number of numbers on the screen. I can go into the next line. So I print a print line statement in order to start from the next line, right? So you keep track of the number of entries you have printed so far, and do a modulus to see if you need to print a next line statement with the system out print line. Okay? Any question? So if you wanted to obviously change it to 10 numbers at a time, what would you do? You could just replace your per line 5 with 10, for example. Then it should print you 10 numbers per line. Any question? Stars.java, let's see this example as well. So when you look into this, okay, let's build. How do you think I can write this code? So basically, it starts with 1 star and then prints how many? Probably 10 stars on the last line. So basically what you do is, you have a for loop, right, that is going to start with 1 and then go all the way to 10. And for each line, it is going to print as many number of stars as you have on your line on the screen. So if it is line 1, it will print 1 star. If it is line 2, it is going to print 2 stars on the screen, and so on. So what do you think we need here?
Line number.
You need a line number that is going to start from 1 to 10, and then you need an additional, probably a loop, right, that is going to print as many stars as you have in the line number on the screen. So you probably need to have 2 for loops in order to do this, which is exactly what is done here. So you have int row equals 1, row max rows. So if you have 10 rows, then you're going to go from 1 to 10. And then every time you will increment your row by 1. And for int star equals 1 and then star less than or equal to row. So if you're in the 3rd row, you would like to have 3 stars printed. So you start with 1 and then go all the way to 3. And every time you print a star on the screen. So if I wanted to change the code such that I would print this star something like this, how would I modify my code to perform this? So every time you again have a row that is going to range from 1 to whatever the max row is, right? That will be the outer for loop will be same as the original one. However, for each line, what are we going to print is going to be the thing that we need to change. So how many spaces do I add for each line? So you need to decide on how many spaces you have here, right? So you need to print, if in this case I have 4 rows, right? I have, let's see, 2, 3, and 4. I have 4 rows, and I will have n minus 1, max rows minus 1 spaces. So I will just print that many spaces, right? And then I will print how many stars?
2n minus 1.
No, for that row I need to print only 1 star, which is going to be the row number, right? That I'm going to print. And for the second line, I need to print. So you will print 2 times row number minus 1, right? So that's the number of stars that you need to print. So if you wanted to modify this loop, what would I do? I will have here, right? So I have int star equals 1. And then I will have, what am I going to print? I will print a space here. How many spaces? So I will have max rows minus 1 spaces, right? And then what will I do? I will print the stars starting from 1 to, where would I go? 2 times, no, I will go, yes, 2 times row minus 1, and that should do it, right? Let's see. So we didn't execute it correctly. What was the problem?
Should be max row minus row.
Max rows minus row. Yes. Yes. So it's basically you need to, decide on the math what you want to print how many times. So you can come up with a different shape if you need to. Any question? Again, the importance was we have used 2 nested for loops, one in another one. So when you look into the expression in the header of a for loop is optional, so you may omit having the for loops expressions. So for example, you could just leave those spaces empty, such as this one. So you could have written a for loop using this way as well. So you don't need to actually initialize a variable or set a condition or do an increment afterwards. So it's possible to write a for loop which is just going to have nothing inside in any of these statements. So that's totally possible. There's no problem with that. But you probably want to add those things as it's usually needed. If the increment is left out, no increment operation will be performed. If the condition is left out, it's always considered to be true. So you don't have a condition means that it is going to continue to do whatever you have been asking doing inside, as long as there's a return statement or a break or continue type of statements. If you don't have one of those, it is going to continue forever. And if the initialization is left out, no initialization will be performed, obviously, as a result of not having those. So iterators for a loop, if you recall, in CS 101 we have used such iterators for a book object. What it does is, if you remember, if you have a book list iterator, you can use a type book object, my book, which is defined by you, within only be used for loop. So you define your my book case, and then in the book list iterator, you will be selecting each item and indicating by my book variable. So you will be able to use and iterate through the book list one by one using this iterator. So this, what was this loop called, if you remember? For each loop, right? So for each book in your book list, you're going to print it on the screen. So this is basically, again, a variable which is defined just only be used in this loop. So this is defined only within this loop, and that's type book, and your variable is my book. When you iterate through book list, you pick those books one by one and print them on the screen. Okay? So it's also considered as like for each book in the book list, which is the for each loops, indication. It eliminates the need to call the has next and next method explicitly. So it provides a better implementation or simpler implementation for the programmer. So you don't need to check whether there's any more components in your iterator or not. Basically, that's going to be identified by the for each loop. So you can just rely on the fact that for each will decide whether it has more elements or not based on the has next method. It's going to be able to do it for you. So we go into the decisions and graphics. So we will see drawing techniques. If you look into the bullseye example, let's go into that. It's going to use loops to indicate graphical objects. So bullseye. So So this is what bullseye is. Probably already know. As you can see, you have a frame and there's a panel on top of that, and then within a panel you have circles or draw ovals, right? So how do you think I can come up with such a drawing? So what as one of your friends said, we will start with the outermost oval, the circle, and then print it on black, and then on top of that we will print another circle white, and another one black, another one white, black, and then at the end we will have one single call for a red circle or a draw oval object that we will be printing on the screen. Then I will be able to achieve this. So obviously you can reduce the size of this ring, so you have a smaller ring and multiple levels of this, so that's possible. So let's see the code. Again, bullseye, basically use the bullseye panel, which just creates this object and puts it into the frame. So this is added to the frame, and the main code is actually appearing in that bullseye panel. So let's go see bullseye panel. So when you look into this, you see that we have a max width which is set to 300, and then number of rings 5, and then ring width is equal to 25, and you have the constructor called here bullseye panel. It will set the background and then set the size of the whole panel. And we have the paint component, which is basically doing the whole paint operation. So it's going to set X and Y to 0, diameter to max width, and set color white. So the initial color will be white. It's starting from count 0 all the way to number of rings. How many rings you have, it will update, it will print according to that. So it gives a flexible implementation. So you will go from 0 to count, and every time you increment count by 1. If you look into this statement, what does it do? It changes the color. If the current color is black, it will change it to white. Otherwise, it will keep it as black. So which means it must be previously a white color. So it's just swapping between white and black, black and white. So one after the other one. Alternate the colors. And you have a page fill oval, X and Y. These were initial coordinates set to be 0 and 0. And then the diameter and the diameter, which is going to be the bounding box initially, right? So we will have the XY coordinate, and then the outermost diameter, and then the diameter square to print the first oval. And then what will we do? We will change our circle to move forward into the center, right? So we will have something like this. In order to be able to print such a thing, what do I need to do? I need to find out the coordinate that is going to be on the left topmost point of the circle, of the bounding box, and then I will have a certain box dimensions, X and Y, with this new circle. So when you look into this, diameter is reduced by ring width. So it is going to, instead of this diameter, it is going to reduce 2 times whatever that difference is. So it is going to reduce that. The ring width times 2 will be subtracted from my current diameter so that I get the new diameter. And then I have X and Y coordinates set to be X plus the ring width, right? And then Y plus the ring width. So it's going to set the X and Y, new XY coordinate based on that, right? So it's going to set the new X and Y, and then go here, switch the color, and fill oval, print the new circle on the screen. Go here, update X and Y and diameter again, and change the color, print it again, and so on. So it will do this 5 times since I had 5 rings. And at the end, obviously, you will need to fill oval, the new, the last one on the center with a red color, so that you have the bullseye at the end. Okay? So if I wanted to modify this number of rings, I could just modify this number of rings to 10, right? Would it be sufficient? Let's see. So it didn't really help. Why it didn't help? What do you think happened here?
We had to decrease ring width.
We have to decrease the ring width as well, right? So if you wanted to ring width, number of rings, 10. It's an int, so it's going to give an error, as you said. Probably not, it's not going to look really nice. Not too bad. So this is how it looks like. Okay, so again, the nice property is that you you have everything set based on the constant values here, so it's a good programming experience. You know, you should set these constants at the beginning of your application so that it will be modular. If somebody wants to modify a certain variable or parameter, he or she can just look into the variable and update it and easily get the result. However, in this case, ring width is maybe chosen based on the number of rings as well. So you could have come up with a formulation to get the ring width as well to make it more modular in terms of implementation. Any question? So let's see boxes.java, which is again a graphical application. So we have again a boxes panel which is going to be created and then put it on the frame and have the frame printed on the screen. Let's see boxes panel.java. So when you look into this, you have a number of boxes. Let's first print this on the screen and see how it behaves. So as you can see, it's having a different number of squares on the screens or rectangles on the screen, and some of these are painted to a certain color, such as yellow or green, and we will see why some of those are printed with different color. So let's see the code here. So we have a boxes panel which creates a random number generator. So we created our random number generator as I have shown in the last lecture. It's again a random number generator and gives you a certain random number. And we set the background to black and dimensions to 400 by 300 for our panel. Then what do we do on the panel? We have, as you can see, we have X and Y width and height for the rectangles. So you have, starting from count equals 0, count less than number of boxes, so you indicate how many boxes you would like to have, and then you generate X and Y coordinates, generator next int, so it's going to give you a random integer that is going to be with maximum X value plus 1, and then you have the Y coordinate of the same square or rectangle, and then you generate for width and height as well, max side, and for each side you have a certain setting for the max side. What's the initial value? Let's see. Max side is 50, so it's going to have a value that's between 0 and 50, and then we'll have that size for the width and height. If width is less than the thickness, so if you have a width that is less than the thickness that you're looking forward to, then you paint it to be yellow and then fill a rectangle. So this is basically what it is doing, is that if the box is not big enough, if it is less than a certain value, something like this, instead of having the box shown on the screen, it shows a filled rectangle. So it fills this rectangle and then shows it. Again, if it is a small, tiny height here, it is going to also paint it instead of showing the box. Otherwise, if it doesn't have a shorter values for the width and height, what it does is it just plainly prints the box. Okay, so this first thing checks if your width is less than the thickness, you set the color to yellow, get the coordinates printed on the screen. If your height is less than the thickness, what do? You are also setting the color to green and then fill the rectangle and print it on the screen. Again, a filled rectangle. Else, if none of those happen, then in that case you just print the box itself instead of that. So you have else page set color white. This was fill rectangle. However, this is draw rectangle. It will draw the rectangle on the screen based on the coordinates and then the width and height of the rectangle. So going back to the example here, as you can see, these are the boxes that have a smaller width and a smaller height, yellow and green, as shown here in the colors. Okay. The rest does have a bigger size than the thickness. So, for example, if I just modify this to have a thickness that is set to, let's say, 350, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Everything will be, probably, should be. As shown here, all of them are yellow. Why all of them are yellow? Why not green? Because we're checking first the yellow one. If you go back to the code here, you see that we first check if width is less than the thickness. Since this always becomes true, it always paints them with a yellow color instead of going into the rest of the else statements. Okay. All right, let's give a break and then we will continue.